Words have power to kill. I discovered this the day my own son wished for my death in front of 500 people. That's when I died for the first time, but it wouldn't be the last. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to whoever's watching. My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 70 years old, a retired businessman from Boston, Massachusetts, or at least that's where I lived until recently. If you're enjoying this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Leave in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is when you're watching. Every day there's a new story here on Grandpa's Tales. I know my story might seem hard to believe, but every word I'm about to tell you is as true as the sun rising over Boston Harbor each morning. I spent my entire life building a solid fortune. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, no sir. I started as a door-to-door salesman. Later, I set up a small food distribution company that grew through a lot of sweat and tears. I worked 16 hours a day. Sometimes I'd sleep in the warehouse to receive deliveries in the middle of the night, all this while raising my son, Tyler. His mother, Marlene, always complained that I worked too much, but I did it all for them. I wanted to give my son what I never had: education at the best schools, trips abroad, brand-name clothes, a car when he turned 18. And above all, I wanted him to have a secure future. When the boy said he wanted to study medicine, I didn't think twice. "You can do it, son. Your father will pay for everything." And I did. 6 years at an expensive medical school, a furnished apartment near Harvard Medical School, tuition, imported textbooks, conferences all over the country, exchange programs in Europe. I never let him want for anything. I always believed that educating a child was the greatest investment a father could make. But even in my worst nightmares, I couldn't have imagined the return this investment would bring me. That day at his medical school graduation, those words in front of everyone, I still feel the bitter taste rising in my throat when I remember. But hold on, I won't get ahead of myself. I want to tell you everything properly, so you understand how a son can kill a father without laying a finger on him, and how a father can rise from the ashes even after death. I was born in a small town called Millfield, about 50 miles outside of Boston. My parents were farmers who grew corn, beans, potatoes, whatever the land would yield. Life was hard but honest. From the age of 7, I was already helping on the farm under the hot New England sun. School was a luxury. I studied when I could at a small rural school with one teacher for all grades. I remember my notebook was made from leftover wrapping paper from the general store. A pen was a luxury I only knew at age 12. At 17, I decided I wanted more from life. I took an old, falling-apart Greyhound bus to the big city. I arrived in Boston with just the clothes on my back, $20 in my pocket, and a burning desire to succeed. At first, I slept at the bus station or under awnings. I found work as a porter at Faneuil Hall Market. Later, I became a helper at a grocery store in Beacon Hill. The owner, Mr. Johnson, saw that I was hard-working and taught me the secrets of the trade. "Robert, look customers in the eye, smile even when you're tired, and never ever sell bad products. Better to lose a sale than lose a customer." Over time, I saved up a little money. By 22, I'd saved enough to rent a small commercial space in Back Bay and start my own business, a food distribution company. In the beginning, it was just me, an old van, and a lot of legwork. I visited small markets, restaurants, diners, offering products at better prices than the big wholesalers. My routine was grueling. I woke up at 4 a.m., organized the day's deliveries, drove all over the city, came back to do the accounting, and still went looking for new clients. I'd eat a sandwich while driving, often not returning home until after 10 p.m. But each new customer was a victory. Each signed invoice was a step forward. It was during this time that I met Marlene. She worked as a secretary at one of the companies I delivered to. A beautiful woman, long dark hair, bright brown eyes, and a smile that made me nervous. I started passing by that company more often, even when I didn't have deliveries. I'd bring a box of chocolates, a simple bouquet of flowers, until I finally worked up the courage to ask her out. Our courtship was brief. We married after 8 months. I was 25, she was 22. The ceremony was simple, in the hall of Trinity Church. My parents came from Millfield, proud to see their son establishing himself in the big city. Her family was middle class from Boston. They looked somewhat disdainfully at me, the country boy who sold things door to door. But that didn't bother me. I knew what I wanted from life. The first years of marriage were good. Marlene got pregnant in the second year, and when the doctor said it was a boy, I felt my chest swell with pride. My son, my heir, the continuation of my name. When Tyler was born, I swore to myself that he would have everything I never had. First-rate education, opportunities, comfort. By that time, the business had already grown. I had 3 trucks, a larger warehouse in Dorchester, and 10 employees. I worked harder than all of them combined, leaving before sunrise and returning when Tyler was already asleep. Marlene complained about my absence. She said I was more married to the business than to her. "You don't even see your son growing up, Robert," she would say. And she was right. But I always answered, I'm doing this for him so he never has to go through what I went through. The sacrifices were many. I missed his birthdays, school parties, baseball games. I was always busy, always in an important meeting, always closing a deal that couldn't wait. When I had time, I made up for it with expensive gifts, the best video games, the most modern bicycle, then the latest computer. Tyler had the most well-equipped room among his friends. Over time, the company prospered even more. We expanded to other states in New England. I opened branches in Hartford, Providence, Portland. I bought a large house in a gated community in Brookline with a pool and 4 suites. I changed cars every year. Marlene had a housekeeper, a driver, an unlimited credit card. Tyler studied at the most expensive private school in Boston. He had private English tutors, swimming, tennis, everything of the best quality. But money can't buy everything. The distance between my family and me grew. Marlene and I grew apart. The arguments became more frequent. She said I didn't pay attention, that I only thought about work. I replied that I was building an empire for our family. "What good is an empire if we don't have a home, Robert?" she questioned. And I didn't know how to answer. When Tyler was 12, Marlene asked for a divorce. It was a blow, but not a surprise. She took the boy to live in an apartment in Cambridge, an upscale neighborhood. I kept the big, empty house. The agreement was generous on my part. A very high alimony, school, health insurance, trips, everything paid for by me. I didn't want my son to lack anything material, perhaps trying to compensate for my absence with money. The first signs that something wasn't right started in adolescence. Tyler, always a good student, began to show arrogance. Teachers called attention to his condescending behavior toward less privileged classmates. When he turned 16, he demanded an imported car. I gave it to him. When he crashed the car 3 months later, I bought another one. Marlene said I was spoiling the boy, that he needed boundaries. But how could I deny anything to my only son, my heir? When the time came to choose a profession, Tyler announced that he wanted to study medicine. I was proud. My son, a doctor. It was a dream I could never have for myself. I would gladly pay every penny for that expensive education. After all my effort was to give my son opportunities I never had. But I didn't imagine that decision would be the beginning of a story that would change our lives forever. Tyler's years in medical school were expensive, but they were also the years when I grew most distant from him. He was busy with classes, hospital rounds, medical school parties. I remained immersed in work. We would see each other at occasional dinners, on holidays, when I deposited the tuition money. Our relationship was more financial than affectionate, although I wouldn't admit that to myself at the time. His mother, Marlene, had moved on with her life. She remarried a doctor, ironically. Dr. Richard, a renowned cardiologist in Boston. They lived in a luxury apartment in Back Bay, with a view of the Charles River. From what I heard, the doctor had a successful private practice and influence in the city's medical circles. Perhaps that's when Tyler began to see his stepfather as a role model and to view me as a crude businessman, without refinement, just an ATM that financed his dreams. The professors said Tyler was brilliant, had a facility for learning, a photographic memory, quick reasoning, but they also noticed his excessive individualism, the difficulty in working as a team, the arrogance toward colleagues who couldn't keep up with his pace. "He'll be an excellent doctor, Mr. Mitchell," the course coordinator once told me, "but he might need to learn a bit more about humanity." I was proud of his academic performance, of course. After all, it was my investment paying off, wasn't it? When he got a spot for an exchange program in Europe during his 4th year of medical school, I spared no expense. First-class ticket, furnished apartment in London, rental car, unlimited international credit card, everything so that my son could have the best possible experience and come back even better prepared. When he returned 6 months later, Tyler was different, more distant, more critical of me. He commented about my country accent, my table manners, my clothes that weren't designer brands. "Dad, you need to take better care of yourself. You look like a door-to-door salesman, not a successful businessman." His words hurt me, but I swallowed them. After all, he was my son, my only son. In the 6th year of medical school, he was already talking about opening a private practice as soon as he graduated. He wanted to specialize in plastic surgery, because that's where the money is, according to his own words. He never talked about working in public hospitals, serving in underserved communities, giving back a little of the privilege he had to the society that trained him. His plans were always focused on profit, status, social recognition. "Dad, I need more money for graduation," he told me 3 months before the big day. We were having lunch at an expensive restaurant in the Prudential Center, one of the rare moments when we met in person. "How much, son?" "About $80,000. I choked on my wine. $80,000, what for?" "Party, Dad. I need to rent a nice venue. Top catering, good band. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment." "But doesn't the university already hold a ceremony?" He rolled his eyes impatiently. "That's just the protocol, Dad. The real party is organized by the class afterward. Everyone's doing it. I can't be left behind." I wrote the check right then, without questioning further. It was the last big expense for his education, I thought. Afterward, he would be graduated on his way. He could begin to forge his own path, and I could finally retire. Maybe travel a bit, enjoy the fruits of so many years of hard work. The big day arrived. The ceremony would be in a huge auditorium at Harvard Medical School, with capacity for more than 500 people. I dressed in my best suit. I bought a new watch for the occasion. I even had my beard trimmed at a fancy barbershop in the city. I wanted to look presentable, worthy of my son, the doctor. I arrived early, anxious. I secured a seat in the 3rd row, right in the center. From there I could see Tyler up close when he went on stage to receive his diploma. I had even bought a new professional camera to record the moment. Marlene arrived shortly after, accompanied by Dr. Richard and some relatives. They sat on the other side of the auditorium. We exchanged only distant nods. The ceremony began punctually at 7 p.m. The graduates entered in a line, wearing the traditional black gowns and square caps. Tyler was there, proud, smiling. When his name was called to receive his diploma, I stood up and clapped hard, proud. I took several photos as I felt my chest swell. There was my son, Dr. Tyler Mitchell, the fruit of my work, my sacrifice, my absence. It was worth it, I thought. It was all worth it. After the diploma ceremony came the speeches. A university representative spoke about the importance of medicine, professional ethics, commitment to public health. Then it was announced that Tyler, as one of the best students in the class, would give the speech on behalf of the graduates. My heart raced. I didn't know he would be the class speaker. What an honor, my God. I prepared the camera, adjusted the focus. I wanted to capture every second of that moment. Tyler took the stage with confidence, adjusted the microphone and looked at the audience. He began by thanking the professors, the institution, his classmates. He spoke about the challenges of the medical profession, about the responsibility of caring for human lives. His voice was firm, his speech well articulated. "I also want to thank our families," he continued, "who supported us during these difficult years, especially my mother Marlene and my stepfather, Dr. Richard, who were my great supporters and examples of successful professionals." I anxiously waited for the mention of my name. After all, Who had paid every penny of that graduation? Who had financed the apartment, the car, the trips, the conferences, the imported books? I want to thank everyone, Tyler continued, except for one person. A strange silence fell over the auditorium. My smile froze. The camera trembled in my hands. My father, Robert, sitting there in the third row. He pointed directly at me. All eyes turned in my direction. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. The best present you could give me today would be to die. Then I would inherit something useful to start my clinic. The entire auditorium held its breath. Some nervous laughs broke the silence, followed by murmurs of astonishment. I saw Marlene on the other side cover her mouth with her hands, but not in horror. She was smiling behind her fingers. Beside her, Dr. Richard maintained an impassive expression. I don't exactly remember what Tyler said afterward. My ears were ringing. My vision became blurry. I only remember having risen slowly, putting the camera in its bag with mechanical movements, and walking toward the exit. 500 people were watching me, 500 pairs of eyes following my public humiliation. I didn't run. I didn't show emotion. I kept my spine straight, my step firm, my face expressionless. Inside, however, something had broken forever. At that moment, as I crossed the long corridor of the auditorium toward the door, I knew I would never be the same man again. In the parking lot, I got into my car and sat there for almost an hour, staring at nothing. I didn't cry. The tears seemed dry, frozen somewhere inside my chest. It wasn't sadness that I felt. It was a mixture of shock, disappointment, and, mainly, a frightening clarity, as if a curtain had been torn from my eyes, and I could finally see the raw truth. My son didn't love me. He never had. I was just a means to his ends, an obstacle between him and my money. I drove home in silence. I didn't even turn on the radio. I needed to hear my own thoughts, to organize the ideas swirling in my head. Upon arriving, I went straight to my office. I sat at my desk and stared at Tyler's childhood photo that I kept on the table. A smiling little 5-year-old boy holding a colorful ball. Where was that child now? At what point did he transform into the cruel young man who had publicly humiliated me? I spent the entire night awake, thinking. When the sun rose, I had made my decision. It wouldn't be impulsive. It wouldn't be driven by momentary anger. It would be calculated, cold, definitive, like a surgical strike. The kind of clean cut that my son learned to make in the medical school I paid for. The following 3 days were intense activity. First, I called my lawyer early in the morning and scheduled an urgent meeting. I explained the situation and what I wanted to do. He tried to dissuade me. He talked about considering it calmly, about not making decisions in the heat of emotion, but my resolution was unshakable. Maurice, are you going to do what I'm asking, or should I look for another lawyer? Faced with my firmness, he agreed. We began the procedures immediately. On the first day, I sold the house where I lived, a spacious property in a gated community in the best area of Brookline. The sale was quick, below market value, but that didn't matter to me. I received $1,800,000. Then I sold my 2 cars, a luxury pickup I used to visit clients in the countryside, and an imported sedan for city use, another $300,000. On the second day, I went to the bank and withdrew all my investments, $3 million in fixed income investments, stocks, real estate funds. Everything I had saved over decades of hard work. I transferred most of it to an account in Switzerland, which my lawyer had helped me open years ago when I started exporting to Canada and Mexico. It was a legitimate account, declared, with nothing illegal about it, but that Tyler knew nothing about. Still, on the second day, I cancelled all the benefits I maintained in my son's name. The premium health insurance he had used since he was a child, the rent of the apartment where he lived near the university, the insurance for the car I had given him as a present when he got into medical school, the additional credit card on my account, which he used without limits to buy brand-name clothes, dinners at expensive restaurants, parties with his medical school friends. I cut everything, leaving no loose ends. On the third day, I went to the clinic that Tyler was setting up with my money. I used my key. After all, I was the one paying the rent. The place was almost ready, Walls painted immaculate white, designer furniture, state-of-the-art medical equipment. Everything carefully chosen by my son to impress the wealthy future clients he intended to serve. I placed an envelope on the main desk, in what would be his office. Inside, a handwritten letter with firm, unshaking handwriting. It wasn't an angry letter. There were no insults or inflamed accusations. It was cold, direct, definitive, like the scalpel he learned to handle. Tyler, you asked for my best present, my death. Consider it done. Robert Mitchell died at your graduation. The one signing now is a stranger. You killed your father with words. Now live with the consequences. P.S. Check the county records. I left the clinic and locked the door for the last time. On the way home, I stopped at the county clerk's office and registered an official document, a declaration of definitive family severance. In it, I formally declared that I no longer recognized Tyler as my son, that he had publicly wished for my death, and that I considered him dead to me from that moment on. The document had no legal value for inheritance issues. I had already dealt with that with my lawyer, altering my will, but it had a symbolic weight that I knew would deeply affect Tyler. Back at the apartment, I finished packing the few suitcases I would take with me. Basic clothes, some important documents, old photographs of my parents, mementos from my childhood in the countryside, nothing that reminded me of Tyler or the life I built for him. That part of my existence was over. The final act was to buy a one-way ticket to Portugal. I chose Lisbon because it was a city I had always wanted to know, for the common language, for the possibility of starting over without insurmountable language barriers. I had Portuguese citizenship through my maternal grandparents, which would facilitate my legal stay in the country. When day finally dawned, I left home without looking back. I took a taxi to Logan Airport, boarded the TAPI flight, and left the United States. I left Boston. I left the memory of the man I had been for 70 years. Robert Mitchell, the dedicated father, the successful businessman, the man who sacrificed everything for his ungrateful son, had died. In his place was born a new man, still without a defined name, still without a clear identity, but free from the weight of disappointment and betrayal. The phone didn't stop ringing in the days following my departure. I turned it off as soon as I arrived in Lisbon, but before that, I could see the growing desperation in the calls and messages that Tyler sent. First came indignation. "Dad, what kind of joke is this? Where are you? I need to talk to you urgently." Then the feigned concern. "Dad, I'm worried. Nobody knows where you are. Please, give us news." Then panic when he discovered the accounts were empty. "What have you done? Where's the money? How am I going to pay for the clinic? Call me now." And finally, the naked, raw desperation. "Dad, it was a joke. I was nervous. I didn't mean it. Please come back. I need you." In 3 days, I received 247 calls. I didn't answer any. On the third day, a voice message came from him crying, begging for forgiveness, saying he had been influenced by friends, that he was sorry, that he loved me. Too late. The Robert he knew was dead, and the dead don't answer phones. Lisbon welcomed me with open arms like an old friend I hadn't yet met. I rented a small apartment in the Graça neighborhood with a view of the Tagus River. It was a modest place, nothing compared to the mansion I had in Brookline, but it had charm, personality, and mainly peace. In the first days, I just walked through the narrow streets of the city, feeling the mild sun on my face, hearing the sound of trams, breathing in the salty air that came from the ocean. It was during these walks that I began to plan my new life. I didn't want to sit still, living only off my savings, substantial as they were. I needed a purpose, something that would make me get out of bed every morning with enthusiasm and expectation. The answer came when I stopped to eat at a small tavern in Bairro Alto and tried bacalhau a Gomes de Sá, which reminded me of the New England cuisine I so appreciated. "This dish needs some American seasoning," I commented to the establishment's owner, an older Portuguese gentleman with grey hair and an easy smile. "Do you know about cooking?" he asked, interested. "Not professionally, but I grew up in a family where food was sacred, and I spent my entire life in the food business." The conversation flowed naturally, and before lunch was over, I already had the seed of an idea planted in my mind. I would open an American restaurant in Lisbon, not just any place with clichés of hamburgers and hot dogs, but an establishment that would showcase the richness and diversity of New England cuisine. In less than 3 months, I found a suitable space in the Alfama neighborhood. It was an old bakery that had closed its doors, with a large hall, a well-equipped kitchen, and even a small patio in the back, where I put tables for summer days. I hired a small but efficient team, an American chef who had been living in Portugal for years and knew the local products well, 2 Portuguese kitchen assistants willing to learn our seasonings, 3 waiters, and a Portuguese manager who spoke an adorable Americanized Portuguese. I named the restaurant Robert's Storehouse, a tribute to my past as the owner of a food distribution company, but also a way to keep my name alive, even for an audience that knew nothing about my previous history. Success didn't come overnight, but it was built solidly. In the first months, movement was timid, mainly Americans missing home cooking. Then some food journalists discovered the place and wrote positive reviews. A famous Portuguese blogger posted a photo of our clam chowder with an enthusiastic comment, and reservations began to multiply. In a year, Robert's Storehouse was already recognized as one of the best international cuisine restaurants in Lisbon. We expanded the menu, hired more employees, opened for lunch and dinner every day. I was busy, fulfilled, surrounded by people who respected me for my work and knowledge, not for the money I could give them. Meanwhile, news from the United States arrived through old contacts. My lawyer Maurice, the only one who knew my whereabouts, sent me monthly updates about the happenings in Boston, especially those related to Tyler. The story wasn't pretty. Without my financial support, my son faced a series of difficulties he had never imagined possible. The clinic, without my money to support it, was never inaugurated. The equipment was sold to pay debts, the furniture auctioned, the space returned to the landlord. Tyler's fiancée, a young doctor from a traditional Boston family, who clearly expected to marry the heir of a successful businessman, broke off the engagement as soon as it became clear that he no longer had access to his father's fortune. She wanted a rich doctor, wrote Maurice in one of his emails, not an indebted doctor with a bad reputation in town. The medical residency that he had secured at a prestigious private hospital was abandoned when Tyler entered a period of deep depression. He began to drink excessively, miss rounds, argue with superiors. He was put on leave for health reasons and never returned. The apartment where he lived, the one I rented for him near the university, had to be vacated in a hurry when the late rents accumulated. He moved temporarily to his mother and stepfather's house, but the cohabitation soon proved unsustainable. Dr. Richard is not willing to support his adult stepson, reported Maurice, especially after he discovered that Tyler expected to inherit his private practice when he retired, something he imprudently commented during a heated argument. 1 month after my disappearance, Tyler went to the county clerk's office and discovered the document I had left. The declaration of definitive family severance caused a tremendous impact, not just on him, but in the entire social circle we frequented. The news spread quickly, and soon Tyler became known as the doctor who lost his father and $5 million for a cruel joke, as Morris informed me. But the hardest blow was yet to come. Exactly 1 month after my departure, I sent a single message to Tyler's cell phone, a selfie of me in front of the Belém Tower in Lisbon, with the caption, "Dead men don't send selfies." It was the only direct communication I had with him in that first year. The reaction, according to Maurice, was explosive. Tyler contacted the police, Interpol, the American consulate in Portugal, trying to locate me. He tried to initiate a legal process to recover what he considered his inheritance, claiming that I was mentally unstable when I made the transfers and sales, but there was no legal basis for his allegations. And all the procedures had been meticulously documented, proving my full mental capacity. About 6 months after my departure, Tyler discovered where I was. I don't know how he got my address. Perhaps some bank employee was bribed, or maybe he hired a private investigator. The fact is that one morning when I opened the door of my apartment in Lisbon, I came face to face with my son. He was thin, haggard, with deep eye bags and an unshaven face. Nothing remained of the arrogant, well-dressed young doctor who had humiliated me at graduation. "Dad," he exclaimed with a choked voice, trying to hug me. I took a step back, keeping him at a distance. "I don't know you," I replied in a calm voice, showing no emotion. "Dad, for God's sake," he shouted desperately, trying to grab my arm. "God wasn't at the graduation," I replied, firmly removing his hand. He collapsed in the hallway, crying like a child. The neighbors began to open their doors, curious about the commotion. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I let him in, but I maintained emotional distance, as if I were receiving a stranger, not my son. We sat in the small living room of my apartment. He looked around, probably surprised by the simplicity of the place. I, who always lived in mansions in the United States, now lived in a modest apartment with simple furniture and few luxuries. "Tyler," I said after a long silence, "do you know what hurt the most?" He looked at me hopefully for some sign of forgiveness, of reconciliation. "It wasn't you wishing for my death," I continued. "It was the 500 applause afterward." His eyes widened. He hadn't expected this observation. "No one defended me," I continued with the same calmness. "Not a professor, not a colleague of yours, not your mother. 500 people applauded when you wished for my death to inherit my money, so I decided to really die for you all." He tried to explain, to justify, to say it had been a tasteless joke, that he was nervous, that he was influenced by jealous friends. But his words sounded empty, rehearsed, devoid of genuine sincerity. Then came the real reason for the visit. "Dad, I'm living on charity." "Great. Dead men don't pay rent," I replied, without changing my tone of voice. "I can't work," he continued desperately. "Dead men don't need staff." "Forgive me," he begged, kneeling before me. I looked into his eyes, those same eyes that once looked at me with love when he was just a boy, and that later filled with contempt and greed. "Dead men don't forgive," I replied simply. He left my apartment defeated, devastated. I don't know how he managed to get money for the return ticket to the United States. Maybe he asked his mother, or sold the last valuable asset he had. What I do know is that he never again appeared personally at my door. 1 year after my departure, Maurice sent me a link to a YouTube video. It was Tyler sitting in front of a camera with a still, haggard appearance, but more composed. The title of the video was "My Biggest Mistake, Losing My Father." It had over 2 million views. In the video, he told his story, our story, in an emotional way. He talked about how he had been ungrateful, how he had disregarded the sacrifices I made for him, how he had let himself be led by greed and the influence of people who didn't have his best interest at heart. He confessed that the graduation speech had been planned with his stepfather, who wanted to distance Tyler definitively from me to bring him into his own clinic as a minority partner. "I didn't realize I was being manipulated," he said in the video with tears in his eyes. "Only that I was rejecting my own father, the man who gave everything for me, when it was already too late." The comments on the video were merciless. "Deserved it. Father did right. Ungrateful. What goes around comes around. You reap what you sow." Public opinion was clearly on my side, although I had never given my version of the story. People naturally intuited the injustice that had been committed, the gratuitous cruelty of a son against a father who had only sacrificed himself for him. In another sign of a complete turnaround, Maurice informed me that Tyler had become a meme on American internet. The doctor who killed his father at graduation was how he came to be known. His professional reputation was tarnished. No hospital wanted to hire him. No clinic accepted him as a partner. His name had become toxic. Meanwhile, I continued building my new life in Portugal. The restaurant prospered. I had made new friends. I had even begun a discreet relationship with a retired Portuguese teacher who frequented the storehouse on Sundays. Life was good, peaceful, without the pressures and responsibilities I carried in the United States. At a certain point, I decided to formalize what was already a fact, my definitive break with the past. I called a Portuguese lawyer and prepared a new will. In it, I left half of my assets to a nursing home for abandoned elderly in Lisbon, and the other half to be divided among the restaurant employees, those who had been by my side building this new chapter of my life. For Tyler, I left exactly 0 with a note. Already died for him in 2023. The justice I sought was not through courts or legal processes. It was a deeper, more meaningful justice, the justice of natural consequences. Tyler wished for my death to inherit my money. He got half of what he wanted, my symbolic death, my disappearance from his life. But the money, that which truly motivated his cruelty, that he will never have. He lost everything: his father, the $5 million inheritance he expected to receive, a promising career, social respect, and mainly peace of mind. And why? For killing me with words at a graduation, for a moment of calculated cruelty that revealed his true character. As they say in Boston, according to Maurice, he's the doctor who lost his father and $5 million for a cruel joke. But it wasn't a joke, it was a premeditated emotional assassination. And I, the supposedly dead victim, was reborn from the ashes on another continent. Almost 2 years have passed since that day at graduation. Time, that old sage, has a unique way of putting things in perspective. Today, sitting on the small balcony of my apartment in Lisbon, watching the sun set over the Tagus, I think about everything that happened and feel a strange peace. My life in Portugal has consolidated in ways I never imagined. Robert's Storehouse has become a small gastronomic success, with lines on weekends and reservations made weeks in advance. We expanded to a second location, also in Lisbon, but in a different neighborhood. I hired an American chef from New England who brought authentic recipes from my homeland. The Portuguese love our clam chowder, our lobster rolls, our Boston cream pie. I've made true friends here, people who approached me for who I am, not for what I have. My neighbor, Mrs. Helena, a 75-year-old widow, taught me to appreciate fado and introduced me to the rich history of Lisbon. With her, I learned to slow down, to appreciate the small moments, to live without the constant pressure of work and accumulation that marked my life in the United States. The relationship with Margarita, the retired teacher I met at the restaurant, evolved into something beautiful and mature. It's not a passionate youth romance, but an affectionate companionship, a safe harbor. We've traveled together around Europe. I've visited Paris, Rome, Barcelona, cities I always dreamed of visiting, but never took the time for when I was busy building my empire for Tyler. And speaking of Tyler, news continues to arrive through my lawyer, Maurice. After the confessional video on YouTube, he tried to rebuild his professional life. He got a job at a health center in a Boston suburb, working for the public health system, something he would have previously considered beneath his dignity. He lives in a simple apartment, very different from the luxury he was accustomed to. Maurice told me that Tyler has periodically tried to contact me. He sends emails, messages, leaves messages, all with the same content: regret, requests for forgiveness, promises of change. For a long time I didn't respond to any of them, until about 3 months ago, when I received a different email. It didn't contain pleas or self-flagellation. It was simple, direct. Dad, I know I have no right to call you that after what I did, but I want you to know that I'm working at the health center in Roxbury. Here, I see daily people who never had a tenth of the opportunities you gave me. Children who dream of being doctors, but who will probably never have the chance. I started a voluntary guidance project for young people who want to pursue a career in health. It's little, it's late, but it's something. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your lessons, even through the pain I caused to both of us, were not in vain. Tyler. I stared at the screen for a long time after reading that message. There was no manipulation there, no implicit request, no attempt to move me to get something. It was just an honest account. After a few days of reflection, I replied, it was the first direct communication I had with my son in almost 2 years. Tyler, the project with the young people is a good initiative. Continue, Robert. Brief, without emotion, without opening space for more. But it was something, a minimal acknowledgement that I had received his message, that I had noticed his effort. It wasn't forgiveness. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive completely, but it was a small step. Since then, we've exchanged sporadic emails. He tells me about his work at the health center. about the patients he attends to, about the young people he mentors. I respond with short, factual phrases about the weather in Lisbon, about the restaurant. Nothing personal, nothing deep. It's a superficial, distant communication, but it's more than we had before. In one of the last emails, Tyler asked if he could visit me again. He said he would understand if I refused, but that he would like to see me even if just for a few minutes. I still haven't responded. I'm still thinking. This whole experience has taught me a lot about human nature, about how money can corrupt relationships, distort values, poison hearts, about how even the people we love can hurt us deeply, about how words can kill not the body, but the soul. I also learned about new beginnings, about how it's never too late to reinvent oneself. I, at 70 years old, built a new life in another country. I made new friends, started a new business, found a new love. If someone had told me that would be possible 2 years ago, I would have laughed in disbelief. And perhaps the most important lesson, I learned that revenge doesn't bring lasting satisfaction. At the beginning, when I heard about Tyler's suffering, I felt a kind of perverse pleasure. He's reaping what he sowed, I thought. But that feeling diluted over time, giving way to a resigned sadness for what could have been and wasn't. What brings me peace today is not knowing that Tyler suffered the consequences of his actions. It's knowing that I found strength in myself to rebuild my life, to move forward, to find happiness where I least expected it. Sometimes, when I'm sitting here on the balcony watching the sunset over the Tagus with a glass of Portuguese red wine in my hand, I think about the boy Tyler once was, the bright-eyed little boy who would run into my arms when I came home from work. The curious teenager who asked me questions about the world, the determined young man who entered medical school, and I wonder where we lost the connection. At what moment did money and status become more important than love and respect? I don't have definitive answers. Maybe I never will. Life isn't a mathematical problem with an exact solution. It's a complex journey, full of detours, surprises, disappointments, and sometimes unexpected redemptions. What I know is that I learned to live one day at a time, to value small joys. Mrs. Helena's smile when I taste her bacalhau, Margarita's hand in mine during a walk through São Jorge Castle, the aroma of coffee in the morning, the satisfaction of seeing my restaurant full of happy people. Tyler wished for my death to inherit my money. Ironically, he managed to kill something in me, the devoted father, the naive man who believed that material sacrifice was a sufficient demonstration of love. But from the corpse of that man was born another, wiser, more balanced, more aware of his priorities. He wanted my death to inherit. What he got was giving me a new birth while losing everything he valued. As for the future, who knows? Maybe one day I'll allow Tyler to visit me again. Maybe one day we can have an honest man-to-man conversation, not as father and son. That bond was irreparably damaged, but as two adults who share a complicated past. Maybe. For now, I continue here in my little piece of paradise in Lisbon, living each day as an unexpected gift. I stopped obsessively planning the future, as I did in the United States. I learned that some of the best moments in life are those we don't plan, that simply happen when we're open to new possibilities. In the words of Fernando Pessoa, the great Portuguese poet, everything is worthwhile when the soul is not small. My soul grew through pain, and today, despite everything, or perhaps because of everything, I can say it was worthwhile. Thank you for listening to me this far. If you liked it, leave your like and subscribe to Grandpa's Tales. If you watched until the end, comment below with the word revive. And don't forget to check out the other stories here on the channel. On the screen are 2 that you'll like. A hug from this old man.